You People was probably the worst movie of 2023 so freaking far. Never in my life would I have believed I'd watch a movie that drained my brain cells for 2 hours. But what makes this more interesting is that I had the perseverance to sit through this for 2 hours. I've been wanting to turn this movie off after 30 minutes multiple times in a short span of time, but I was hoping I would be surprised at some point. But no, instead we get the most predictable movie ever made. This is pretty much Guess Who's Coming to Dinner without the intelligent writing, the well-written characters, the smart utilization of social themes, the smartly written dialogue, the well-structured narrative, and the entertainment value. Now this was directed by Kenya Barris, who made 2 TV shows that I personally love, that's Blackish and Grownish. Both shows pretty much deal with social themes in the same way that this movie thought it was, but the difference is the stories in each episode weren't compounded by the exploration of these themes, and they moved with fluidity and purpose the entire series, even if season 6 of Grownish didn't fully deliver and started getting a little more in woke territory. But still, I enjoy both shows and how they explored themes with good writing to back it up. Now this is Kenya Barris's directorial debut, and he's written a few movies before, and apparently he should probably just stick to TV writing because he had absolutely no clue how to write a feature film. He already pissed me off with creating the pretentious intergalactic movie, and that same degree of pretentious seeps through this terrible Twitter-centric preach fest.
I saw a dude fencing in the Olympics, a black dude, this past Olympics, and I was like, man, too much. Like when they took the Confederate flags out of NASCAR, I was like, nah, let them have that. You take too much too fast, baby, they out looking for me. You know what I'm saying?
Every single joke is just stretched out with poor attempts of comedic dialogue that goes on for over 5 minutes. It's just so uncomfortable and displeasing to sit through. But what's worse about this movie is that the direction just makes these scenes more displeasing to watch. The directing and cinematography is like TV level for the majority of the time, and nothing feels like it's being communicated visually. It's just the same camera movement of slow panning to the right or whatever, and it's just so distracting. Many of these scenes are just characters sitting and vomiting out verbal diarrhea about their political and social views, and it's absolutely nauseating to sit through. And when the camera is not doing that TV moving panning crap, it's just stationary boredom shots as we're forced to watch these characters just talk their ear off about every single racial social view again and again and again and again. That's all the dialogue is. This is followed by a very obnoxious soundtrack and an overly stimulating scene transition every 5 minutes, and it makes me wonder where half the budget went aside from the actors, because apparently they're paying their actors a lot of money. Speaking of actors, Eddie Murphy and Nia Long never felt more underutilized in this movie that ironically advertised Eddie Murphy as top billing, but the performances felt so restrained and not in a good way either that serves their character in the story, because I keep having to remember that they were even in this movie considering how underwritten and devoid of screen time their characters were. It was absolutely shocking, and this resulted in how boring their characters were, and were once again just mouthpieces for Kenya Barris to preach his political views. Now films are usually just mouthpieces for the writer or the director, but at the very least there's a story being told and a film actually being experienced by the audience. Here it feels like unfiltered Kenya Barris forgetting that he was making a movie and not on Twitter. I have a feeling he gathered a bunch of social driven Twitter posts and turned it into an imitation of a screenplay, and it led to the least believable writing of this year so far. I just couldn't stand it. And going back to the performances, what was up with David Duchovny? Did I pronounce his name right anyway? He was acting as if he was drinking on set, or was he half asleep? Like what the f? He looked so bored and so disinterested, the same way Eddie Murphy looked, only he made it a lot more obvious. You could take both these guys out the movie and nothing would change at all. Okay, so I noticed something about the way this movie was structured. I mean, the plot overall just completely struggles to commit to the comedic side and the social commentary element, and you can see it just in the writing. Both elements are just butting heads and not going where the film wants you to think it's going. It makes the overall film so disjointed and so unfocused, and it seems to be at the expense of trying to make the experience accessible. Like, do you really think this script didn't need a rewrite? Like, for God's sakes, this movie was already 2 hours long. Cut at least 30 minutes of this repetitive nonsense and lean up the script just enough, and maybe everything won't feel as stretched out. The movie just can't fully commit because the characters are all painfully one-dimensional. The movie can't balance any of these characters out, and the result is a film struggling to develop or give everyone the change the movie thinks that it's giving everyone. Sometimes we're just subjected to suffering through this cringe-inducing dialogue, and it just doesn't do anything to contribute to any of these characters or their characterizations. It's like Hill and Barris thought that having them talk about these things without it being attributed to the story. I know it may sound like I'm reaching a bit, but there's just so much going on in this movie, while at the same time there's absolutely nothing happening, and the plot to this movie is just dead. So basically what's going on is Ezra and Amara meet because she's lost and she's looking for her job, and Ezra's Uber driver happens to look like Amara, which implies, I guess, that he was on the brink of falling in love with his Uber driver who happens to look like Amara, who just conveniently showed up conveniently in the exact same type of car apparently. I mean, really? So after we skip ahead to the been there done that relationship development montage, and at least we see it, so I'll give the movie that. But the movie falls flat on its face when every single character's dialogue is just social issues and nothing else. Now, Blackish was filled with dialogue that explores social issues, but the characters still feel like they were written with actual character and not just lecture vessels. And yes, I just made that word up, by the way. But for 2 life-sucking hours, we get nonsensical plot elements, such as the Muslim father, played by Eddie Murphy, dropping the N-word as if he's not Muslim in the first place. Why does he say this? Does he not read the Quran, even though he claims he has? Doesn't the Quran say, and do not insult one another and do not call each other by offensive nicknames? Wretched is the name of disobedience after one's faith. Did he not read that part? I'm not saying he needs to be a perfect person, but the film never really explores why he's an imperfect Muslim. The film just lets him get away with whatever he wants to say because of social commentary, I guess. But white people are given the consequences of throwing pop culture references around since they're interacting with black people, which I get, but again, Blackish did this too. But the difference is, you people thinks that the white people in this film are the ones that need to reevaluate their mistakes when a Muslim is tossing the N-word around. Like, come on, and it gets worse. Okay, so there's like a scene that involves Ezra's mother comparing the Holocaust to slavery, and it's a whole conversation about which one is worse. And I mean, it's all played out for some sort of comedic element. I mean, talking about stooping so low to try to get some sort of social commentary joke in, I mean, good God. There's also another trite scene where Ezra goes to the hood with his father-in-law and he's wearing a red hoodie, and some of the brothers in the barbershop tell him to take off the red hoodie because it gives the impression that he's associated with the Bloods. But they look at this bleached haired white dude and think that he's a freaking gang member. Then paint the walls behind you blue instead of keeping it red, because that makes no freaking sense. But then he keeps it on when he plays basketball and nobody bats an eye or acknowledges it. Like, what the f***? But I think the most irritating plot point is when Eddie Murphy's character follows Ezra to Vegas. I think he goes to Vegas for his bachelor party. He makes it known that he's following him to see if he does anything, and I like to add the offensive lesbian crack in the plane scene. I'm not going to go into detail, but if you're a lesbian that decides to dress less feminine, then you shouldn't be defending this movie, let alone watching it in the first place. So he's waiting for Ezra to do some sort of drugs, but instead of being discreet and spying on him and recording anything he does on his phone so he can send it to his daughter or his wife, he sits right next to him, expecting him to do something with his father-in-law right next to him. Like, how stupid are you? But thanks to the magic of plot convenience, people Ezra knows have to dump everything that he did when he was on crack apparently. And apparently it was all in detail for comedic effect and plot progression. I don't know, whatever, it's just stupid. But it was the stupidest scene in the movie. I mean, what was the father expecting would play out after letting his presence known to Ezra? So by this point, the movie goes exactly where you expect. The couple has a second act break, which is the low point where they decide, due to culture differences of each family, that they decide to break up, blah 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 blah. You've seen it before. And then we jump to 3 months later, and the parents talked to each other and made a plan to not only reunite Ezra and Amara, but also have them be married right then and there at that particular time. So I assume that after 3 months they expect they wouldn't be seeing other people during that time. I mean, if that were the case, if they actually did meet other people, that would be painfully awkward, wouldn't it? You know what made Guess Who's Coming to Dinner work? Was that we actually saw the transformation of the parents' perspectives. They went from thinking too much of the cultural boundaries that they didn't understand their daughter broke, to accepting the love that she and her boyfriend actually had that transcended those boundaries. We actually saw their character development, but here we're told what should be seen, and by then that's the most important part of the film, and it's off screen. So yeah, the bulk of the issues with this movie is that it just feels dated. The social commentary feels dated, the humor feels dated, the filmmaking feels dated, the humor feels dated, as I just said already, but I think I'm going to acknowledge that one more time. It all just feels so forced. And at some point, one of the characters said that there's racial intensity in this social climate, and all I could say was, what? Okay, for one, we never see it in the film. And 2, was this supposed to come out between 2018 and like 2020 or something? I mean, racism still hasn't changed, it's still around, but ever since the liberals took control of the White House, the racist people have minimalized into hiding. So I don't know what made you idiots put that line in your final draft, even if it was a final draft in the first place, which I doubt. Like, we don't even need this movie. What is this movie doing that Get Out didn't already do in 2017? It did what this movie did, only with an identity, and the fact that this movie comes out trying to do what Get Out did with absolutely no identity of its own just pisses me off. If you're going to make a movie like this, explore new aspects to these topics. Don't repeat them. Nobody asked for this movie. Like, nobody asked for it. Nobody wants it. Nobody cares about it, except for the people that like this movie for some strange reason. So yeah, overall this movie was just awful. The film was shot like a TV show, with TV show level story and plot progression stretched for 2 health declining hours. The performances were all restrained and the actors looked bored. Granted, Jonah Hill did do his best to carry this crap, but the social message was just completely dated and offered nothing new to say. Look guys, just skip this failure of a movie, watch Get Out or watch Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. 2 movies that are much better than this. And that's all I gotta say, because I'm never gonna watch this movie again or think about it ever again. Alright peeps, I'm working on my review for The Last of Us thoughts so far, and that should be out hopefully this week. I don't know. I'm just saying that. But anyway, peace out. Love y'all.